The sound of light crackling sparks through the air as the small embers of a cigarette burns aggressively. A man in his early 30s tiredly removes the cigarette from his lips before blowing out a stream of smoke into the night. He's of East Asian descent, almond eyes blankly staring off with deep, sunken bags lining the outside of them. He stands at just around 6 feet, has a wide build of a frame with just a bit of a beer belly. In his hand rests a phone, held up to the side of his face as he listens drearily to the voice on the other side.
You know what you have to do.
The static sound of a voice on the other side of the line can be heard. While the words are harsh, there's a bit of softness in the voice on the other side. One might perceive it as empathetic. The man nods blandly, as if the other person can see him do so. He removes the phone from his ear before hanging up and slipping it back inside his pocket. He looks longingly at the cigarette before taking one last drag and flicking it away. The cigarette butt bounces across the pavement 2 times before coming to a halt and rolling to a stop. The man turns on his heel, back towards the row of apartment units he had come from. It's a humble row of apartments, mainly made for lower-income households. He walks along the row of them until he spots his destination. A lone girl sits on the stoop of one of the apartments, staring blankly into the distance, oblivious to anything that might be happening around her. The man pauses for a moment, realizing that the sight causes his hand to tremble. He grips it tightly, willing it to stabilize as he takes a deep breath to steady himself. He releases his breath before walking closer to the girl. "Hey, June," he speaks softly, as if one would talk when rousing another from sleep. June blinks slowly, broken from her reverie, as she turns to face the man. She's a cute, short girl of Southeast Asian descent. Her long, black hair is curly and unkempt. She has mocha-tinted skin and a smile that could light up a room. However, that smile is currently nowhere to be found. Replacing it is a plastered smile, one that the man finds deeply unsettling.
Hello, my love.
She smiles widely at him, swaying slightly from her seated position, just another thing that the man is concerned about. Henry Liu hadn't always had the easiest life. A youth full of rebelliousness and broken trust had caused him to make no shortage of mistakes. However, nothing that he had experienced so far could even hold a candle to how hard this would be. He lets out a breath he didn't know he was holding and squats down next to June. "What would you think if I said we should go on a trip?" he says softly, eyes breaking away from hers as he looks to the side.
A trip? Where?
June lights up immediately, perking up at Henry's suggestion.
Are you taking me to Hawaii?
He closes his eyes tightly, brows furrowing at her response. She should know that that would be impossible, that funds hadn't been saved, that plans hadn't been made. She should know these things, but she doesn't. He takes a deep breath and wonders how to respond. He doesn't want to lie, but he clearly doesn't want to tell her the truth as well. I just want you to take a trip with me," he murmurs, barely above a whisper. June smiles and nods enthusiastically.
Well, if we're going to get married, it's only right that we go to Hawaii first.
His stomach drops. but he can't lose heart. Not here. Not now. He turns to face her, a weak smile tugging at his lips while tears threaten to well up in his eyes. You know I love you, right? He asks, more for himself than for her.
And I love you.
She responds with a smile.
Unconditionally.
His inner voice scoffs, wondering exactly how true that might be. Henry closes his eyes and slowly gets to his feet. He offers a hand down, paired with a small smile. Then go on a trip with me, Henry says weakly, his courage starting to fail him. She smiles and takes his hand.
Anywhere.
He can still hear her screams. Henry sits in the dark on his bed, staring at the far wall with a haunted gaze. It's a large room, but today, it feels much larger than before. Perhaps it's because he feels so small. Perhaps it's because he just wishes the earth would split open and eat him. He would wish nothing more than to curl up and die. He can still hear her screams as they dragged her away, screams that begged and pleaded him to save her, screams that he had blatantly ignored. He grips his head, the roots of his hair painfully throbbing as tears spilled down his cheeks. I'm sorry, he whispers into the darkness, but it doesn't respond. He can still hear her screams, but he couldn't respond. How could he when he was the one who had put her there? When he was the one who ultimately had to make the decision? The weight of the world had fallen on his shoulders, and he had to be the one to decide what to do with it. What was I supposed to do? He asked the wall bitterly. Why couldn't someone else have taken the burden? Her friends? Laughable. They had all decided to distance themselves from her. One had the audacity to call him and tell him that they couldn't handle it because they had an exam to deal with. They were supposed to be childhood friends, for God's sake. Family? Even worse. The moment her symptoms began to show, they treated her like a pariah, like she didn't even exist. Her mother was ashamed of her social media posts, and relatives had all but disappeared. Tell me what I was supposed to do, he asks again, this time angrily. The wall wasn't responding, not that it needed to. From a logical standpoint, he knew he had done the right thing. He was not equipped to handle her situation. Hell, he didn't even know what her situation had been. All he knew is that the woman he cared for had fallen apart to the point that he could barely recognize her. Psychiatric wards were better equipped to handle situations like hers, or at least treat the worst of the symptoms. On the other hand, he knew how much a place like that could damage a person. At that moment, though, he had had no other options. So why did he feel like a monster? Because I am, he answered himself, drawing his knees to his chest and hugging them tightly. His face drops to his knees and his tears begin to soak his pants. Perhaps tomorrow would be better. Perhaps he'd be able to wake from this nightmare, and June would be healthy again. Perhaps she never really believed that there were recording devices in her walls. Perhaps she never screamed her theories all over social media. Perhaps she never hit him when he tried to stop her. Perhaps it was all a prank, and he would wake up in the morning to see that everything was well. But it was unlikely. you could still hear her screams. 5150. The California Law Code for temporary, involuntary psychiatric commitment of individuals who present a danger to themselves or others due to signs of mental illness. Hi, hello. My name is Percy, and you've just listened to the first makings of a book I started to write a few years back. Near the beginning of the pandemic, I was forced to make a decision that I never really foresaw myself making. Now, I've been pretty open about who I am and the things I've gone through. In fact, while the title of this channel is VoG Persona, I'd like to think that the anonymity of the channel has allowed me to speak on things that I can't really in my day-to-day life. For those of you who have been here a while, you'll know that I've been homeless, I've been an addict, and I've done a number of things that I'm not proud of to survive both those states of being. However, as tough as those things have been, nothing comes close to being forced to choose to commit my partner, at the time, into a psychiatric ward. Maybe there are some of you who have no idea what I'm talking about. And if that's the case, in the tags at the end of the video, you will find a playlist that I created in order to go over certain things in my life. And feel free to browse at your leisure, but I will warn you that the content is kind of heavy. I first started this book as a form of self-therapy. As you can imagine, the toll that it took on my mental, emotional, and physical well-being. Since then, I've seen the importance of such a book, as while spreading awareness for the mentally ill is important, I find that as a society, we rarely see these stories told from the perspective of a caregiver. The anxiety, the lack of self-care, and most of all the burnout. These were things that I gave no attention to for the next 2 years as I struggled to hold it all together for a partner who wasn't able to do it for herself. It's a struggle that I know many people silently suffer through because they don't think they have the right to feel bad about their own situations. So, why am I sharing this at the foot of my 5K landmark? Well, because I stopped writing this a while back. Or I've written chapters here and there and rewritten and scrapped so many times that I've kind of lost sense of where I'm heading with it, or how I would even complete it. Do I intend to publish it when it's done? Well, yeah. I think that it's an important message to get out there for people who would rather suffer in silence. And I kind of hope that by getting this out here, I'll be inspired to keep pushing. Because you are the ones who inspire me to keep pushing. This channel would have literally gone nowhere without you. It started as a fun afterthought to practice and hone my skills in voice acting, but I never would have imagined the memories and experiences that I've gone through since then. Somewhere out there are 5,000 of you who support me. That's absolutely insane. I am touched. I am moved. And I love you guys so much. I can't wait to continue to make memories with you, pushing myself alongside you, be encouraged by you, and hopefully encourage you too. There's a long road ahead of us, and we're nowhere near done. But I wanted to take a moment to thank you. Thank you for supporting this odd man who makes odd voices. You've truly blessed me. All right, I think I've rambled enough. This is Percy, signing off for now. Upwards and onwards, always.